Okay, so what we will now do is I will try to quickly summarize the Kane self-forming action SFA theory in the businesswoman case and comment quickly on some of the objections Kane considers, and then we'll get to our actual objections to this. So, I mean, many of you may already know Kane's position, but he says this extended luck principle also is false, as illustrated by the case of people who are in a situation of conflicting desires, like duty says do X, desire says do Y. And the case he's, I guess, famous for is the businesswoman who sees somebody being mugged in the alley on the way to an important meeting, which is crucial to her career. And she's a decent person. She both wants to stop and help, and she also wants to get to the meeting. So we get these conflicting desires. And so as Kane sees it, we've got, in these sorts of cases, he now has a sort of piece of scientific speculation. It is possible, and apparently some of this fits what is known about the brain. I mean, those of you who know the brain may say more of it fits or does not fit. But in these sorts of situations, here is her desire to stop and help. Here's her desire to go to the meeting. Phenomenologically, she experiences this as a tension in her will. Kane says, but look, the desire to stop and help can be represented by one recurrent neural network. The desire to go to the meeting can be represented by another recurrent neural network. And neither of these networks has yet been activated in such a way that we get to an action. And furthermore, indeterminism is involved. There is always indeterminism at the subatomic level in the neurons, and it's just bubbling away. But in the usual case, it gets screened off, so it doesn't bubble to the surface. I mean, in the usual case, I decide to pick up the glass. But in this case, Kane speculates the networks are linked in such a way that what's happening in this network screens off the processes that keep the indeterminism here from bubbling to the surface, roughly. And this network, where desire to stop and help screens off those processes, so the indeterminism here can become causally active. And the same thing happens symmetrically with this neural network. Her desire to go to the meeting screens off what keeps the indeterminism from becoming active here. Kane puts this in terms of chaos. This situation becomes chaotic. This becomes chaotic in the sense that we have these nonlinear things happening. And so now, she's still in a state of tension. But say, there's an indeterministic event here which now actually activates this network. Okay, so she goes, stops and helps, activates this network. All right, so Kane says, but look, if this is activated, this is what she wanted. She did want to do this. She endorses this. She's got reasons for it. She's happy with it afterwards. So we would hold her responsible. It's just like the assassin case. But the same is also true here. In the assassin case, you don't hold the assassin. You don't, sorry, not in the case in which, switch over to the Austin putting case. So you're trying to putt and you miss because of some indeterministic event. Well, okay, you did miss. It was indeterministic, but in certain of these circumstances, we don't say you acted freely by missing. But you're nevertheless, it's nevertheless your action. But in these cases, we would hold her responsible if she stops and goes to the meeting. We'd also hold her responsible, says Kane. Sorry, if she stops and helps, we'll also hold her responsible if she goes to the meeting, because again, that's what she wanted to do. She endorses it. She's happy with it. So according to Kane, the luck principle star is false. These are cases where it's indeterministic. It is not determined that she voluntarily and intentionally goes to the meeting, nor is it determined that she voluntarily and intentionally stops and helps. She does one or the other of these, and either way she's responsible, says Kane. So now we've refuted the luck principle. Okay, this leads, I will try to various objections Kane considers. So I'll mention some of these really quickly. Well, for example, the Mealy case. Mealy had, the beautiful Mealy argument. The same past for John and John's store, and then the possible worlds diverge, and John does X and John star does not X. Well, okay, Is it the case, says Kane, that neither of them is responsible? No, we just say they're both responsible. And so we refuted the Mealy case. And what about voluntary control over your actions? I mean, wouldn't you say that the businesswoman did not have voluntary control over what she was doing? Well, says this, we're eventually going to get into a lot of sort of back and forth about this, but well, says Kane, no, she has diminished voluntary control. It is true that the indeterminism is a sort of hindrance. I mean, if you think of these things as separately, her attempt to stop and help is being hindered by indeterminism, say, that might lead her to go to the meeting and vice versa. But she still has a kind of control, which, according to Kane, which he calls plural voluntary control. And I should read this to you. Having plural voluntary control over two options considered as a set, like go to the meeting, stop and help, means being able to bring about whichever of the options you will or most want when you will will to do so without being coerced or compelled into doing so. And Kane says the businesswoman satisfies these conditions. She, in his sense, she is able to bring about whichever of the options she wills or most wants. No one is compelling her. She'll endorse either of these. So he takes it that although she has a kind of diminished control, she has acted freely in either case, and she is responsible. So here's the position, and now we get into the objections.
So I think that there are a number of objections that were developed, but we would like to point to the objections made by the participants of the cruise. So, for instance, Derek, in his paper that was included, also tries to present a strong argument against Kane. And I assume that this is the disappearing agent argument, and the argument states that agent actually in these situations it has is not determining. It does not have a role to play in the decision, in the choice. So if we imagine this situation with a businesswoman, I mean she does seem to have alternatives, and she creates those. She does have different motivations, but the actual antecedent conditions, those motivations and those deliberations, they don't determine the outcome. So the agent doesn't have any role in the choice itself. So again, it becomes a matter of chance and luck. I assume that maybe you can give a Dennett-style answer to the disappearing agent argument, and maybe you'll correct me, but I think that you can diminish the agent to a small, tiny spot, spaceless spot, and then that will be the case. But I think that if you look at the agent as a pattern of events or a pattern of activities, then you can actually defend Kane's position against the disappearing agent argument. Do you want to?
But I mean, I myself think, I mean, whether or not the disappearing agent objection comes, I actually think it recurs. But I mean, I think there is still a problem here, because even if we agree that she's responsible if she goes to the meeting, also responsible if she doesn't go to the meeting, there's really nothing she herself does which amounts to her picking this thing to do rather than that other thing to do. I mean, she gets herself into this conflicting motivational state of wanting to go to the meeting and wanting to stop and help, and then she, so to speak, sits there and waits. And she's not phenomenologically conscious of this, but she's waiting for a indeterministic neuronal event. That happens, and again, she wouldn't describe it this way. She finds herself stopping and helping, or we.
And Kane doesn't describe it that way. He says it's an effort, and it's the effort has this indeterministic part.
So, but what this means is, it seems to me that she doesn't have the kind of control over the action that, in fact, Kane himself would like her to have, because ultimate responsibility, which is what he says he wants, involves being responsible for any sufficient reason for what you do, but she's not responsible for the indeterministic event that leads her to stop and help. So I think, one more comment, and then that, in fact, he hasn't really answered the disappearing agent objection, and this leads to this further problem that someone says, well, whichever one of these things she does is arbitrary. And Kane says that there is a certain ultimate arbitrariness in this situation, because after all, before the thing, there is nothing she can do that will pick, that she does, that picks this one thing rather than the other. But he says that's not a problem, because you should view these self-forming actions as value experiments. I mean, you're the businesswoman, and well, all right, you've got to decide, help or rush to meeting. Well, all right, I find, this is not the way you would put it. I find myself stopping to help. Well, all right, I can live with this. This is sort of experiment in how I should go on living. I can fit this into my desires and so forth, but I could live with the other thing. I myself think this does not answer the arbitrariness objection. Even if you can weave these indeterministic events into the subsequent portions of your life, they still seem arbitrary. So,
but
yeah.
I find the other argument more persuading, and actually I find some part of Kane's position a little puzzling. It is really, it seems like we are treating people, agents, responsible without any special data about the processing of their minds. Like, we don't go and check if, with some kind of device, if a person actually had self-forming actions. But we indeed hold agents responsible. And it is actually very, I don't think that Kane is explicit about explaining, explicit in explaining how often do these, cases happen? Do they happen in, for every individual? Maybe there's some individuals amongst us that didn't have this thorn decisions and did not make this self-forming actions. So it seems to be an empirical question, and it is almost impossible to empirically tell whether someone is responsible or not. So even though Kane provides some kind of answer about possibility of combining and matching the indeterminism with responsibility, he does this in theory. You don't know whether that really occurs, and that makes it really strange, and it makes it really, really strange. We don't know whether we can hold the particular agents responsible, and how would you tell the pseudo number generator from a random number generator? It seems to operate the same way. So that's, I see that is the major problem with Kane.
And just one last, actually two last comments, but one last comment quickly.
And then I'll have one.
And then.
And maybe we'll connect more as we go.
I actually, this is, I am a Kant scholar. I'm not a sort of official free will person. It strikes me, Kane has, I think Kane has a sort of peculiar kind of compatibilism, actually. He's not really giving us the kind of ultimate responsibility he says he is. He has a way of showing indeterminism is compatible with certain ways of holding people responsible. It seems to me you can make standard compatibilist moves. You endorse the action, you're happy with having done it. Well, it turns out it was determined. You still say I was responsible. Standard compatibilists would say this. So I actually think he is a kind of closet compatibilist, though I'm sure he would be unhappy to say that. My other and second point is, please remember Kane isn't here. And so I am sure that, I have never met Kane, but he strikes me as a very nice, thoughtful man. And I am sure that he would have many more things to say than we are saying and attempting to defend the position. But
And I assume that there's, my last comment is that I think Kane states that with the time, as the SFA actions take place, the person becomes more and more responsible. And that strikes me as a false thesis, because even according to Kane, the cases of indeterminacy actually diminish control. So if you diminish it and diminish it and diminish it and diminish it, it seems that the agent will eventually become totally irresponsible, and not the other way. So that's our take on that.
So does anyone?